Om Tat Sat. Welcome to Gyan Bhakti channel from Swami Nikhilananda. My humble prostrations to the all-pervading Brahman, to my worshipful Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayananda Ji Maharaj, to Ram Parivar, all sages and saints, and to each of you divine soul watching today's satsang. We are currently studying the Ayodhya Kand of the mysticism of Ramayana. Commentaries by my Guruji, Swami Jyotirmayanand Maharaj, narrated by myself, Swami Nikhilananda. So we are covering the mystical journey of Rama and Sita and Lakshmana in the forest and what that means from an advanced spirituality perspective. So we were talking yesterday about the two qualities we need. One is called Vairagya or dispassion, and the other one is Viveka or discriminative knowledge. So Vairagya or dispassion brings tremendous acceleration in one's spiritual movement. But Vairagya does not come overnight. We cannot rush this process. Spirituality is a journey, it's a marathon, it's not a 100-meter sprint. So we have to build the energy and have lots of patience on this path. It is not an occasional sentimental frustration with some aspects of the world, but a profound sense of disillusionment with the entire relative world. So this is a holistic growth where we see the transience in all things. We see our body aging and eventually realizing that everything is eventually going towards disappearing, destruction, and that is the nature of the Prakriti. Once we understand that, it becomes more permanent and Vairagya becomes stable. Otherwise, a lot of people have Shamshan Vairagya where they see a funeral and then they say, oh, what's in this world? Everything is changing. But in a few days they forget about it and they're attached back to their body and the relatives and so on. So this Vairagya we are talking about is more of a permanent nature, which comes from blessings of God and after intense tapasya. So, making this transition from a mind that is burdened with attachment and hatred to a mind that flows serenely towards Brahman, God or the Absolute Self, is like traveling through a great forest. An aspirant will inevitably face stages of great despair and desolation in that journey. Nevertheless, the vision of the transcendental must inspire him to move on with conviction and faith. That's why we call it the holy journey, where faith is your staff and strength. Like Rama, who moved on resolutely into the forest despite the grief of all his relatives and friends, an aspirant must move deep into his sadhana or spiritual discipline, leaving all sentimental relationships behind. So his priorities should be clear and he should be well disciplined, a serious spiritual aspirant. His only permanent companions in this realm of Vairagya can be Sita and Lakshmana. Therefore, they accompanied Rama and they represent intellect or understanding and willpower. So, Sita is Sanmati or Buddhi and Lakshmana is Dhyan Shakti or willpower. Although the majority of people feel that treading down such a spiritual path is a pathetic development because they think of it as extreme adversity. To an aspirant, it is most wonderful. That is why Rama said, this is my own choice and this way I will meet sages and saints and increase my spirituality. From the point of view of the masses, it is considered dull and dreary to have a life without the pleasure of the senses, a life without dependence on other human beings, a life without the objects that characterize material success and prosperity. That is why it's called the majority, because that's where majority of the world is. They think they are the body, they think all these transient things are permanent, whereas reality will guide you and teach you that none of these things are permanent. And this is our own practical experience. When we lose a loved one, that's when it hits us for some time and then we close that memory again. Rama, however, found great delight at the prospect of pursuing such a life and remained serene and joyous when he was told that he had to be banished in the forest. So this is the mark of an advanced tapasvi, a person who can maintain equanimity under all conditions. Otherwise, what glory is there to be happy during prosperous circumstances? Anybody can be happy. But when adversity strikes you, when difficult times come, how do you behave? How is your natural instinct? Are you receptive? Do you accept that as a tapasya, as God's will? That's when you will know how far you have come along in your sadhana. So for Rama, it made no difference whether he was a king or an ascetic in the forest. And these are the signs of enlightened personalities. They don't get stuck in material things and possessions, because within them they have this serene atmosphere within at all times. He was beyond karma. He was the embodiment of Lord Vishnu, Brahman himself, Lord Rama. So the divine self, thus he was unaffected. Who could deprive Rama of his kingdom? Imagine the person who has created the whole cosmos is now banished to a forest, and yet he is doing that for doing his Leela. Leela is an illusion, cosmic illusion show to guide us, to teach us, to show us the path. Who could do anything in conflict with Rama's will? In the second verse of Ayodhya Kand, Saint Tulsidas Ji paints an unforgettable picture of Rama's eternal serenity with the following prayer. May that cheerful face of Rama, which did not lose its splendor when he was banished to the forest, nor became more radiant when he was about to be coronated, may that lotus face of Rama bring tender delight and sweet auspiciousness in our lives from day to day. This profound prayer shows the ideal to be emulated by every aspirant, to remain balanced in pleasure and pain, gain and loss, in all pairs of opposites that characterize the vicissitudes of the world process. While the mind of an ordinary individual is ever in turmoil during the diverse conditions of life, an aspirant must strive to hold his mind poised and calm at all times. Only then are we a serious aspirant. Balance of mind is the secret of all prosperity. Even in Bhagavad Gita it says Samatvam Yoga Uchyate, which means equanimity is the highest yoga. And once we have that balance, we are also able to handle prosperity, success and goodness in a holistic way. Many difficult conditions can be easily surmounted if one does not react in an irrational manner. When the mind is held in balance, one has the possibility of employing the correct self-effort in every difficult situation. Similarly, if the mind does not swing to elation and become imbalanced during prosperity, much future sorrow can be avoided. It is through balance of mind that suffering is eliminated and the spirit triumphs over the world process. The precious secret of holding such a balanced mind is given by Saint Tulsidas Ji in his prayer. Enshrine the enchanting face of Rama, the face of the divine self in your consciousness, in your heart. See it ever smiling in the depths of your heart, full of bliss. Adversity and prosperity come and go like clouds, but the divine presence is ever unaffected. The perpetual awareness of that divine face is the fertile soil in which saintliness grows. It is the promoter of all that is majestic and triumphant in the human spirit. So the next episode is crossing the Ganges in Kevat's boat, and it's a beautiful illustration. So after the departure of Sumantra, the minister, the charioteer and the minister of King Dashratha, he went back disappointed. Lord Rama, Lakshmana or Sita, none of them went back. Rama wished to cross the Ganga river in order to enter into the deeper parts of the forest. Thus he called a nearby boatman or kevata to carry them across. Approaching Rama with great hesitation, the boatman said, "Master, I have heard about your miraculous power. I know that when the dust of your feet touches a stone, that stone turned into a lady who flew away into the sky." So he was talking about Ahilya, sage Gautama's wife, that story we had covered a few days ago. And just imagine the sentiments. So we have to understand the deeper underlying meaning of this uneducated, totally illiterate boatman and see how much bhakti he has. What will happen if you step into my simple wooded boat? Will the dust of your feet turn my boat into a sage's wife and leave me without the source of my livelihood? That is what he is saying to Lord Rama. If you wish to enter this boat, first I must wash all traces of that miraculous dust of your feet. So think of the devotion that Kevata had, that he wanted to first wash the feet of Rama to get his blessings so he could put him in his boat. It's very profound. Then and only then will I carry you across the river. Kevata has said that. The boatman was making reference to Rama's encounter with Ahilya merely as a pretext to gain permission to adore the lotus feet of Rama. Hearing these words of spiritually cunning attitude from the boatman, Rama looked at Lakshmana and Sita and smiled. They saw his pure feeling and that he was using the pretense of his boat becoming a rock, and he knew that none of that was true, but he just wanted to, he was overwhelmed to see the feeling and the knowing that God was going to sit in his boat. The story is linked to an ancient legend about a turtle who once swam stealthily into the Milky Ocean. And we will cover this Kevat story in tomorrow's satsang. This was a little bit emotional because of the deep bhakti. I hope you could also experience that with me. This is Swami Nikhilanand. Om Tat Sat. We will continue this journey tomorrow. Hari Om.